So, Pokemon Violet came out over a year ago. I know. I can't say I was exactly on top of playing this game, but 2023 was a very busy year. But I've got to get going. The DLC is out and people are already looking ahead to the eventual Gen 5 remakes and whatever else they've got cooking over there. So today, I'm keeping the intro short and jumping straight into the story of my first ever playthrough of Pokemon Violet. Actually, just kidding. Before we have a story, we need a main character, so let's make one. Now, Pokemon has never really impressed me with its character customization in the past, and I initially thought it was going to be more of the same, but it turns out there's a whole lot more options than I would have thought. Yes, there are many different hairstyles, and actually a refreshing amount of hair colors. Oh, we got a whole thing. But there's a lot more to it than that. It's also worth mentioning early on that I attempted to avoid spoilers as much as possible. I barely even looked at the box. I now see the legendary, for Violet. It's like this, I don't know what it's called, but is it like some sort of like electric dragon thing? I don't know what it is. With Rising version 1.0 eventually produced, it's finally time to actually start the adventure. Actually, just kidding again, because first we have to watch a promotional video about the school we're enrolled in, which is the game's way of introducing this new region, the usual spiel about how Pokemon are amazing and all around us, and how the school is designed to nurture and enrich the relation they have to humans in our unavoidable coexistence. And then, after all of that, we are finally able to play the game. For starters, I think our house is pretty dope. Our room is a decently sized loft of sorts, and while its lack of door or even four walls doesn't offer much in terms of privacy, this no longer matters since we're about to leave and never come back. Upon going downstairs, I casually get stuck on this wall, as well as talk to Mom and continue to casually explore my own home before the director himself barges in. My mom proceeds to insist he join her for a cuppa and tells me off I pop, so I guess we must have moved here from Galar or something, and I guess I should be calling Mum instead. In any case, after she and the director do what I assume is some good old-fashioned snogging, I'm introduced to the starters outside: Sprigatito, Fuecoco, and Quaxley. The starters were one of the few details I knew of beforehand, so I already had my choice in mind. However, the game tells me to pump the brakes and to take a walk with all three to help in my decision. We end up at fellow classmate Lamona's very fancy house, and it's here that I choose Quaxley to be my starter. This is very me because out of now 8 generations, I've yet to actually play Sword and Shield, I've picked the water starter 6 times. But I also chose Quaxley because of the Donald Duck memes. I'll take any Kingdom Hearts reference I can get, even if I did get the 12% chance of it being female. Despite Nimona being a much more experienced trainer than us, like she's champion ranked, she beat the game already, she is very, very invested in our Pokemon journey, so she selects one of the remaining starters as her own so our battle can be more fair. You see, Nimona is very, very into battling. She lives, breathes, and somehow eats battling. So against our will, we battle her, but since she continues the trend of picking the starter with the type weak to ours, and we actually start with the water move, we win pretty handedly. Nimona then escorts us to the school, and during the walk she serves at the catching tutorial, though unlike in previous games, you actually get to keep the Pokemon you catch. This thing is named Lechonk, and that is outstanding. When you catch a new Pokemon, you can see that despite how the Pokedex is an app on your phone, it uses a book aesthetic to record each Pokemon's information, and as a bookworm myself, I love that very much. And even in this first area, there are a lot of Pokemon to catch. This game is an open world with the Pokemon appearing in the field instead of being random encounters, so it's very easy to get distracted by something new in the distance when walking around. Nimona and I reached the nearby lighthouse when we heard a mysterious cry. Near some broken fence, we discovered what appears to be the box legendary already. Is it a Gyarados or something? Oh, is that like the legendary Pokemon? Like from the box? Is that guy? These Houndour, though, are giving it a hard time. Well, it's definitely that thing we saw from the beginning of the game. Oh shit, it just killed me. Well. Oh. I guess that's how our foe protects us. It can lift our weights. Phone physics aside, we approached the Pokemon and offered the sandwich my mom sent us off with, and that seemed to give it enough strength to get up, go through some sort of transformation, and proceed into the nearby cave. With no other paths to follow, I follow it, but things take a turn as a level 40 Houndoom appears and summons a bunch of Houndour underlings. Perhaps touched by my generous sandwich offering from earlier, the mysterious electric bike Pokemon thing saved me and brought me to an upper exit of the cave where Nemona was waiting. However, this rescue seemed to have sapped the Pokemon's remaining power, and it changes back into the form it had when I first found it. Nemona commented that it looked like a Cyclizar, but she's never seen one like this before. Pretty relatable since I don't even know what a Cyclizar is. She suggested we take a breather at said nearby lighthouse, but as we approached, we saw some guy who immediately started scolding the not Cyclizar and told us to scram. Nemona recognized him as Arvin, another student from the academy, as well as the son of a Professor Turo. Arvin didn't react well to the connection, but explained that this Pokemon, Miraidon, is special and that the form it had before, while it was battling, is its true form. Until it achieves that form again, it won't be able to battle. Miraidon seems interested in the lighthouse, but Arvin says that the lab is locked and that it can't go in. Remember this for much later. Arvin decided to battle me to prove we didn't have what it took to care for Miraidon, even though I never implied I wanted to. I win the fight easily and Arvin concedes Miraidon's Pokemon to me, even though, again, I never asked for it. The plus side is that Miraidon does not count as part of my party, so I'm still able to have 6 other Pokemon with me. Since the school was still a fair distance away, Nemona suggested we stop at Los Platos first. On the way I caught more Pokemon, battle trainers, who in this game do not initiate battle upon spotting you, and then I found this weird thing. Making it to the outskirts, I'm shown that in this game, Pokemon centers are more like booths outside that also house the Pokemart, online stuff, and a station where you can build TMs for materials you find battling and capturing Pokemon. The Poké Center lady asked for my birthday and I give it, but I didn't actually play on that day when it came around, so I still don't know what that does. Going to the city itself gives an unfortunate demonstration of how woefully under-optimized this game is. I will say for me this sort of thing is not a deal breaker, but for a series like Pokemon it's frustrating to see them exploit the loyalty of their fan base like this. You see examples of this all over the game. It's not even worth pointing out specific instances, though here's one anyway. Whoa. The cliffs be moving. Look how wavy, wobbly it gets. It's like the shit's melting. While in Los Platos, I found an ice cream stand as the first of many food stalls and stores in Paldea that serve food with the benefit of meal powers. I am going to be frank. I have, even now, still yet to use meal powers. The impression I'm under is that they're handy when you're looking for certain types of Pokemon or trying to increase the odds of other kinds of instances like shinies, but for basic me, who's just here to catch Pokemon and get into the story, it did absolutely nothing for me, and I ignored the whole mechanic completely. Done in Los Platos, I get back to the journey of getting to school by going through the area of Paldea known as Area 1. There I do the usual thing of battling and catching Pokemon, but also discover that the game gives you a few outfits in your inventory to change into from the start. Granted, they're all basically just different versions of the uniform, but at least I can kind of improve the disaster in which I've been walking around in. Out of the 4 seasonal uniforms, does anyone not think the winter one is the best one by far? Dude, she is so tall! Look at her! Climbing mountains means tackling some slopes. I'm sure even a kiddo... player character. Her eyes are up there! Her eyes are up there! And this is how I got deported back to Galar. Finally, Messagosa, the city I've been trying to get to all this time. The biggest in Paldea. It's just beyond that gate. The journey was finally over. And Nemona wanted to battle. Of course she did. It started off like any other battle, but on her final Pokemon, she demonstrated this game's battle gimmick, Terra Stylizing. But this didn't make a difference, and I still defeated her. Despite finally being within sight of the school, I delayed my academic career even further by opting to explore more around the city. I got excited at first because I found a place that sells Rotom phone cases, and I've been admiring the one Nemona had. No, where's the black case? The black case. Do they not have the black case that she has? I'm so upset. No. I'm so upset. Where's the freaking thing? Fine. But no, they didn't have that one. I've still yet to actually find it, assuming you can even get it. The store Delibird Presents has a lot of useful hold items for Pokemon, but without knowing what my team will look like combined with the fact I only have enough money to buy maybe one of these items, I decided to hold off for now. Actually, this is a lie. I don't think I ever ended up coming back here. Maybe I should. In a sandwich store, I found a guy passionate about coming up with new sandwich ideas, as well as... Oh! Glaceon! Let's get a Glaceon! Exactly! Mister, hello? Yes, hi. I can see you're enjoying your sandwich, but you have your Glaceon here on a very lovely pillow. I'd like your Glaceon and the pillow. Please. Please. Please! Can I talk to the Glaceon? I want to talk to the sweet baby! I can't talk to the sweet baby. It's because he's sleeping. Glaceon is one of my favorites, if you couldn't tell. Mesagosa is also apparently the home of the Pokemon League, so I tried to bust in, but of course the game doesn't even give me the chance to try. I came up to the stairs leading to the school and stumbled upon quite the scene. A girl with a really cool Eevee backpack is being bothered by a couple of dinguses trying to recruit her to their group called Team Star. And if you haven't guessed, this is the Gen 9 antagonistic team of thugs out to either take over the world or serve as annoying menaces to the locals. There's never really an in-between. I mean, I guess Team Rocket kinda was. Like, I think they had a long-term goal of expanding worldwide, but never quite got there. But the stunts they did pull, I'd say put them higher up than a local headache. They actually committed acts of terrorism. But pulling back to Team Star, I, as you can see, took out the first grunt pretty easily, and before I can do the same to the other, Nimona showed up and is initially irritated that I was battling randos instead of her. But once updated on the situation, she opted to let us handle the remaining grunt using her gift to us, a Terra Orb. It's the object that gives you the ability to terrestrialize your Pokemon. This is probably a good time as any to get into what that actually means. So being in the Paldea region has given the Pokemon here the ability to terrestrialize, which is a weird crystallization phenomenon. While terrestrialized, the Pokemon's type changes to its Terra type, something you can see in the Pokemon stats menu, and moves the same type as its Terra type become a lot stronger. This at first puzzles me because all of my Pokemon had a Terra type that matched one of their default types, so I didn't quite get what the big deal was. But later on you can run into Pokemon that have Terra types completely different to their default typing, as well as be able to change your Pokemon's Terra type with the right resources. So for example, if your Onix has a Fire Terra typing and terrestrializes against a Grass Trainer, it will now resist moves that would normally be devastating to it. It provides a lot of strategy and competitive battling. Nimona actually says as much after the battle, but for me it must have gone in one ear and out the other. You can only terrestrialize one Pokemon per battle, and you must recharge your orb at the Pokemon Center before you can use it again. Speaking of battling, back to this one here, and yeah, I mean, I won, though I definitely didn't need a power boost to do it. Team Star, of course, retreats, leaving us with their brilliantly cringe catchphrase of Hasta la vista. Well, I'll be on my merry way then, eh? Hasta la vista. Me too. Hasta la... It's supposed to be La Vista. Oh, La Vista. Oh, because it's Star. Because it's a star. They're Team Star, so they're making a pun. It's punny. Ah.
Yes.
The girl with the backpack awkwardly thanks us, and then we, at long fucking last, get to Yuva Academy. Director Clavel greeted us in the entrance hall, scolded us for handling the Team Star thing ourselves instead of letting the proper officials take care of it, and then we're pulled into our first class. In true anime fashion, I'm introduced as the new fascinating transfer student, but I'm disappointed that my seat isn't by the window for maximum pro tag energy. I got to explore the academy on my own, and I ran into that guy Arvin in the cafeteria. He told me about how his dream is to excel in preparing health foods for Pokemon. He believed that in order to achieve this, he needed to collect these Herba Mystica that he came across in a book. That's all well and good, but according to said book, the herbs are guarded by Titan Pokemon. The example shown seems to be simply a Donphan, but the book says point blank that this is not in fact a Donphan, despite the similarities in appearance. A major difference being that this beast has iron treads. Long story short, there are 5 different Titans guarding 5 different herbs, and Arvin wants me to go with him on this quest for plants. I say yes, and the Path of Legends quest begins. Walking away from him, I got a mysterious phone call. Someone calling themselves Cassiopeia had hacked my Rotom phone in order to propose their own ideas for what I should be doing with my time. They claimed that I cannot sit idly by as Team Star, formed a while back by a group of students, continues to harass other students. Cassiopeia claimed to have a plan to get them to disband, but Director Clavel interrupts the phone call and also, unbeknownst to us, seems to have heard some of it as well. Later on, I run into Nimona, who also thinks I don't have enough to do and puts me on the Victory Road quest, which is your standard Pokemon game goal of collecting 8 badges from 8 gym leaders and then challenging the Elite Four. And then Clavel calls me into his office so I can have a video call with a guy named Professor Turo, whom we heard referenced earlier, but now learned that he's not only an alumni of the Academy, but also a top researcher who specializes in the Great Crater of Paldea, also known as Area Zero. He says he was Miraidon's caretaker before, but can no longer perform the role, so if I could please continue to look after it. Nimona then took me back to my dorm room, and while I'm glad it had an actual door, it didn't make up for the fact that I now had all these people who I didn't even know existed before today, counting on me for all these favors and tasks. But this wouldn't be a video game if I weren't the only capable person in the vicinity, and after several days of doing God knows what, all students were given their independent study assignment. We were to go out into the world in the efforts of finding our own treasure. I can only now assume that the time skip I had was how long it took to convince the parents and guardians of all the students to sign the dozens of waivers it must have taken for the school to get away with this. The hell are they even paying tuition for if we were just going to be told to make our own way outside the school by any means necessary? Never have I heard of such a scam. And it works! But instead of jumping at the chance of independence, I turned right back around and started taking classes. Despite this being a school, attending class is completely optional, though you will get some items and even Pokemon for fully completing them. The classes unlock in chunks as you progress through the game, with each course also having a midterm and final exam. The courses themselves basically serve as tips and guides on Pokemon mechanics and could potentially be useful to new players, sometimes. Courses provide basic knowledge and battle strategy, how damage is calculated, and other such things. Like real school, I found most of these to be pretty dull and uninteresting. I truly don't think there's a reason for me to ever mention them again. Just know that throughout the game I came and did them as they became available. After forcing myself through what was currently available, I ran to both Nimona and Arvin outside and they started fighting over whose cause was more important, but they got interrupted as Cassiopeia called me to further explain their plan, which they've christened Operation Starfall. It seems Team Star is made up of 5 squads who each have a base. The idea is that I go to each base and cause enough mayhem that I get to fight the base boss. Upon defeating them, they have to hold up some sort of code they have and step down from their position as base boss. The lack of base bosses would cause enough disorganization that Team Star would have to be disbanded. The Starfall Street Quest was officially now active, though I don't know why they just didn't call it Operation Starfall. So now I have a total of 18 points of interest on my map between these 3 major quests, one for each of the 18 Pokemon types. Other than the big crater in the middle of Paldea, the map was now open and I could go wherever I wanted. While Miraidon can't battle, it served as my main means of transportation, as well as the fast travel points I unlock at every new Pokemon Center or town I visit. Like any other Pokemon game, there are countless trainers and Pokemon to battle and catch in between said points of interest, and while that is a very big chunk of one's playtime with the game, it's better for all of us just to stick to those points of interest. Just assume that I battled a bunch of trainers and caught a bunch of Pokemon. However, that didn't mean the game was done throwing new mechanics at me yet. During my initial wanderings, I see this glowing Jigglypuff, and upon engaging it, I learn that these are wild Terra Pokemon, and in order to catch these, you need to lower their HP enough to break its transformation. These Pokemon tended to be stronger than the regular Pokemon in the area. Shortly after catching it, I come upon this glittery cave, which was a Terra raid. These host even stronger Terra Pokemon that you can either challenge alone with NPCs or with friends. The lower leveled raids are pretty easy, but for higher level raids, you actually need a decently trained Pokemon in order to defeat them before time runs out. And the last travel note for now is that I think I got myself to an area that I shouldn't have been able to yet? Maybe? After doing some weird jumps and navigation, I came across this weird stake in the ground. I pulled it out and nothing happened. I think we're gonna go back to this in the DLC video. But the reason I think I shouldn't be here is that I can't really go back the way I came. Oh well. But back to the main tasks at hand. I first decided to go after a Titan Pokemon, and after an unnecessary call from Arvin, I found it. This big old crab scaling up the cliff walls. It actually looked just like this Pokemon Cloth that I caught earlier, except, you know, a lot bigger. Being that it was called the Stony Cliff Titan, I led with Donald, who at this point had evolved, and it did a pretty good job defeating it. At least that's what I thought until it ran away, busted into its personal stash of herbs, and made itself more powerful. By this point, Arvin had shown up to help, but it wasn't really necessary because even with the power boost, I was still able to easily defeat it. You can't catch it, so I'm not sure if it ran away or died. In any case, we headed into the cave that had gotten the herbs from and found that it was the sweet herba mystica. After reading its medicinal properties from Arvin's book, he made a sandwich from it. As you may recall, this game is all about sandwiches, and apparently so is Miraidon, who upon eating ours seemed to gain back some of its lost powers. In this case, the ability to dash. Arvin also presents us with a homemade Titan badge. Badge itself is whatever, but I'm happy that we also took a photo of the occasion. Arvin lagged behind to do something sketchy, but that's fine because we needed to take a call from Professor Turo so he could tell us more about Miraidon's new power. Wanting to feel these quests out further, I then head for a gym instead of another Titan. Artisan is the home of the grass gym, but before you can challenge gym leaders in this game, you need to do some sort of gym test. I'll mention them all as they occur, but just so in advance that they're all terrible in their own terrible ways. The first test is to find 10 Sunflora, who are a very big deal in this town. I would say this was intended to get the player to thoroughly explore the town and see some of the smaller details, but... Saw the Sunflora are ready for you. With that, your gym test has now begun. Once you found 10 Sunflora, please bring them back here to the Sunflora lawn. That's all for me. Good luck. Bye. Ooh. Is it a time limit? Or can I just, like, dick around? Oh, come on, Pokemon. Like, I know not everyone knows what a Sunflora looks like, but my god. Sunflora will now follow you around. Well, that's kind of fun. I can't wait until I have, like, 9 following me in the game. Is it supposed to be, like, this easy? Okay, well, we've got 3. We've barely left. Yeah. So, as you can guess, this did not take me very long to complete, and while I did indeed like having them follow me around, their frame rates appeared to feel otherwise. But enough about that, how about the actual gym fight? The first gym leader is Brassius, and like I had mentioned, he specializes in grass-type Pokemon, and oh dear. The only thing worth commenting on is his final Pokemon, Sudowoodo. It being a rock type meant that, while it only aesthetically fits his gym's theme, it could resist the poison attacks that had wiped out the rest of his team. But then he terrestrialized it into a grass type, so it didn't really matter. I terrestrialized my Pokemon as well just for fun, but I could have done it without it. Now, if he had made a grass Pokemon into a rock type, then that would have been a good way to show off what kind of strategies are available with this gimmick, but he didn't. I got the badge, which meant I could more easily catch Pokemon up to level 25 and that they would obey me. I assume with this open world format, these barriers are to keep players from just acquiring an in-game team from the get-go. To get a true sampling of what we're working with here, I then decided to go after the nearby Team Star base. Once I got close, I got a call from Cassiopeia, but then once again interrupted by Director Clive. Yes, this man is called Clive, and he'll hear nothing otherwise. Clive here wanted to join us in our operations so that he could take care of unfinished business with Team Star, and Cassiopeia agreed to let him come aboard. So what type of help does Clive provide? Basically none. He chooses to stay outside the base and act as support. Great. So basically how Team Star bases work is that you initiate your intent to challenge the base. Usually whoever is guarding it will fight you before letting you inside. And once inside you have 10 minutes to beat 30 grunt Pokemon. But rather than use conventional battles, you use the auto battle mechanic. In the bases, you can only take 3 Pokemon, but you can use all 3 at once for these auto battles. Should your Pokemon faint or get low on health, there are several vending machines scattered throughout that fully heal your Pokemon at no penalty. Unless your team is severely underleveled, you really can't fail this part. Once those 30 Pokemon are defeated, the boss finally presents themselves. This one is Mela, who specializes in fire types. You get your whole team back, and it's time for a literal boss fight. I will say this at least was harder than the gym or the Titan I had done so far, but the craziest thing was that her final Pokemon was her car. Yes, this thing that looks like a JoJo stand is somehow a Pokemon, and a pretty sturdy one at that. Thankfully, no one in this game uses potions of any kind, so in the end, I'm able to chip her down to victory. I was then treated to a flashback from a year and a half ago. It was all the base leaders having a meeting of sorts. They discussed how they're working on getting their Starmobiles going, and how they're all about to pull off Operation Star. This involved their big boss, who was not there, to gather all the Academy's bullies into the schoolyard. Flashing back to the present, Mela hands us a base badge and snaps a photo. Clive then shows up with a Charcadet that Mela used to spend time with back when she went to school. The Char Cadet seems to want Mel to come back, but after hearing the rumor that school thinks Team Star is plotting against them, she's less inclined to do so. Leaving her and Clive behind, Cassiopeia calls us to confirm her squad should soon dissolve and that they would be sending someone from their supply unit to hand us rewards. This representative turns out to be Penny. She said she's helping out in Operation Starfall for her independent study, and her talents for machines and hacking meant that she'd be working behind the scenes. Hacking, huh? Gee, I wonder what your true role in all of this is. For now, she hands us TM supplies and wishes us luck. Since there are more gyms than anything else, I head to Cortando to face Katie, the bug-type gym leader. Cortando's thing is olives. They've been growing them and having their olive harvest festival for generations. Consequently, this resulted in the gym test being the olive roll, which is taking a giant olive-shaped ball and pushing it through an obstacle course to the goal. Optional shortcuts are blocked by trainers who will move if you beat them. Based on clips I've seen, things can get pretty glitchy trying to roll this olive around, but for me it was more annoying than anything. I guess it gets a point for being at least more challenging than finding the Sunflora. Unfortunately, that's more than I can say for battling Katie. I was still able to sweep her team with a Terra Ice Luxio. I wish I had more to say, but I don't. Actually, I do. Her shtick is that she's a baker and runs a patisserie, which, due to occupational bias, I actually find kind of exciting. I headed over to the bakery after the fight to check it out, and while it looks cool, you can't interact with it at all. There's no flavor text or anything on the shelves, and you can't talk to the cashier, which means you can't buy anything either. I was hoping for some fun healing cupcakes or something, but I guess in Paldea, if it's not a sandwich, it's not worth buying. Pretty disappointing, to be honest. This place looked dope. After the fight, I was approached by Hassel, the Academy's art teacher and member of the Elite Four. He had heard about my promising talents from Nimona, and of course, not wanting to let her down, I made sure to give him a very convincing argument of why I was worthy of such praise. I switched gears again and went after the Open Sky Titan. Upon approaching his mountain, Arvin's usual courtesy call warned me to watch for falling boulders as I proceeded. But dodging them was pretty easy, so I reached the Titan with no issues or concussions. Phase 1 Bombardier was actually able to knock out my Terra Ice Luxio, but Cloth was able to finish the job. On Phase 2, Arvin came in with his Knackley, and he combined with my Char Cadet was more than enough for the buffed bird. After Bombardier left, we raided the cave for its bitter herba mystica. Arvin made more sandwiches, which Miraidon was more than excited about. After eating mine, he went after another, which made Arvin flip out. This outburst encouraged him to finally share why he's been so passionate about this project. He brought out his partner Mambostiff, who was in pretty bad shape. It seems he was gravely hurt a while back in a way that even Pokemon centers can't fix. After a bunch of research, he set his sights on these herbs, and the hope was that having Mambostiff eat all 5 would bring him back to his old strength. And sure enough, between the last herb and this one, Mambostiff did seem to have recovered a little bit. This was very emotional for Arvin, which was nice to see in a character who had so far been pretty distant and bitter about a lot of things. Leaving Arvin with his thoughts, Turo gave us another call to let us know this newest herb had given Miraidon the ability to swim. Whether it was I wanted to unlock more mobility for Miraidon, or maybe just thought they'd all be easy, I went for yet another Titan. Out in the desert was the quaking Earth Titan. When I finally caught up to him, I saw that it was that non-Donphan. For the first time, Turo called us before the battle even started to say that this one, Iron Treads, came from the Great Crater of Paldea, and to do whatever we had to subdue it. I would have done that, really. But in this case, I had bitten off way more than I could chew. Terra slides in my water starter, I was doing good damage, but this thing hit like a truck, and once Donald went down, everyone else quickly followed after. Guess I can't jump ahead as much as I'd like. So, how about another base then? Coming up on the next one, I run into Clive, who gives me slightly more insight as to what he's doing here. Rumors aside, he was also very concerned with how the bosses of the bases haven't attended classes at the academy in quite some time. This combined with the recent mischief has caused him, yes him personally, to have issued an order of disbandment, or else anyone associated with them would be subjected to expulsion. So as far as he's concerned, Operation Starfall has come at a perfect time. This is the Dark-type base led by Giacomo, and it wasn't much of a challenge. The guards out front and the grunt battles within were whatever, but that wasn't surprising. The boss being such a pushover kinda was. His Poniard and Starmobile were his only Pokemon, but unlike last time, levels were also a factor. I'm not one for completely switching teams when playing Pokemon. Sometimes I'll replace a member or two, but never a complete switch. This seemed to be hurting the challenge of the game, though that can't be surprising since this is yet another Pokemon game where the full party gets experience with every victory and capture with no way to toggle it off. This resulted in my team outclassing major battles quicker than I was doing them. Of course, later game things like Iron Treads would be challenging, but that doesn't change that the level scaling is out of whack if you're trying to do these battles in their relative order while naturally exploring and catching Pokemon. So yes, in the end I defeated him and got another flashback from a year and a half ago. Turns out Giacomo was the student council president back when he was at the academy, but the other students ran him out of the position after he tried to enforce many overtly strict and stuffy rules. This caused him to be hesitant when he and the big boss discussed instating a code to help govern them and all new members of Team Star, but the other bosses supported him, saying that he wasn't that person anymore and that he was capable of making a fair and competent set of rules, and so he does. After that, Clive turns up to outright ask why they don't disband with expulsion on the line. Turns out that the holdup was that they were waiting for contact from the big boss, who no one had seen in the past year and a half. Hope for their return is why they've been even keeping Team Star going in the first place after the big boss left. After leaving that scene, Petty showed up to give me my rewards, but asked what I think of Team Star. She said that rumor had it that rather than them all being a bunch of delinquents, they had used to be a group made up of those bullied or who had found it to talk to people, that had banded together to push against those who had wronged them. But don't take her word for it, she only knows from hacking other students' social media accounts. Definitely no personal involvement whatsoever. So I feel at this point you kind of get the gist of how all this works, so let's move a little faster. Lavencia was home to the electric gym, but before getting into that, Nimona started tweaking and needed her fixed, so I battled her and of course won. The gym here goes a little meta, and so does the test. The leader Iono is a streamer in addition to being a gym leader, so of course that's what everything is based on. To battle her, we had to find a random dude she pulled off the street 3 times in different scenes. The random dude happens to be Clavel, who's rather down for this considering this whole thing would not appear to be his scene. After finding Clavel, you have a trainer battle with one of her fans. The idea is that all of this foreplay will make the stream go viral, which would then entice her to collab with us by way of a gym battle. Considering I was streaming this streaming challenge, this felt a little odd, though I can't say I would ever muster the same personality Iono has. Initially I thought the battle with her could potentially be a sweep with cloth, but her Bella Bolts and then later on her Mismagius proved otherwise. It was the most difficult anything I had done in the game so far, Iron Treads aside. In actual team effort, I was surprised. So after that I went after the lurking Steel Titan, but the footage for this encounter got all messed up, leaving me basically with the slideshow. The Titan was Orthworm, and I hate it. But a while ago I had done some trading with a member from my chat for the other 2 starters, and a Crocolore was the MVP of this battle both in Phase 1 and Phase 2. The Salty Mystica was our prize for victory, so Arvin made his usual roid sandwiches. Miraidon gained a high jump, and Mabostiv got a little healthier. Cascarapa is a unique city because it's a city full of people in denial. It's supposedly known as the City of Water, and there do be water, but also sand. Lots and lots of sand. Sandstorms included in battles here, you might be right. That might be a fair assumption to make. Nobody else is apparently like worried about the fact they're getting like a bucket of sand in their eyes every 5 seconds. I'm still tickled by the fact my character is actively suffering in this city. Alright, so yeah, we have water, more water, and a fuck ton of sand and wind. It's unbearable, and realistically everyone should have lung problems, and also this should be a giant mud pit. It's so bad that you don't even do the gym test here. It seems Kofu, the gym leader, is an absent-minded dinkus and forgot his wallet before going out on his errands, so, as our gym test, we must take it to him in Poto Marinata. Of course, I gave this mission the top priority it deserves. Or I take on Iron Treads again because it's in the area. After all, I was now older, wiser, and more importantly, higher leveled. Quaxwell and Crocolore were able to finally beat the beast, and the experience of it caused Crocolore to be the first of the starters to fully evolve, plus give me this fun glitch. Skeledirge is definitely one of my favorite Pokemon of this gen, and its whole evolution line is probably my favorite Firestar line in general. Afterwards, Arvin and I collected the Sour Herba Mystica, and Mabostiv got a bit better. Miraidon can now glide, but Arvin postulates that perhaps what's really keeping it from reaching its true strength is more psychological than physical. Once that detour was over, I made it to Porto Marinata, and after battling his top flunky, I'm finally able to give Kovu his wallet back. But I guess he knew that couldn't be an actual gym test, so he overrides the promise the lobby staffer made to me, and said that in order to actually pass, I need to use the money in his wallet to win an auction that he had been eyeballing. Auctions are this city's thing. The item is some Hoenn seaweed which, as a restaurant guy, interests Kovu very much. In all honesty, I'm not sure you can lose this challenge. I just bet higher than the other guys and won. You know, like an auction. For our gym battle, I initially sent out my Palmo, but he sucked, so in the end, I ended up sweeping with Florigato instead. Medali hosts fan-favorite gym leader Larry and his normal types. To pass this gym test, you have to figure out how to order the Treasure Eatery's secret menu item. Walking around town, you're supposed to find the other challengers, who each have a different clue about where to find the information on how to order the menu item. But no matter how hard I looked, I could only find 2 out of the 3. But in the end, this doesn't matter because the game will let you through with the correct answer whether you talk to everyone or simply guessed. Just like Larry, the fight itself was pretty normal. Quackovel and Cloth got through it no problem. Being over halfway through our gym battle quest, Nemona shows up to battle while Gita watches. Gita has shown up a few times before this point to comment on her potential, and she's a bit of a big deal. She's the top champion of the Elite Four, the chairwoman of the Pokemon League, and the chairwoman of the Academy. Shame none of my battles with her have ever felt that way, but that's jumping ahead. The third team, Starbase, unfortunately suffered from corrupted footage, but fortunately, there's not much to see. Skeletor swept Atticus' entire poison team, and then it was time for another flashback. But again, not much is going on other than getting to see what Atticus' face looks like, and them bonding over their fashion choices. Cassiopeia shares that their ultimate final step after taking out the base's bosses is to lure their big boss out of hiding for a final battle to disband Team Star once and for all. Once again, Penny acts too emotionally involved in all this for her story of this just being for her independent study to make actual sense. Something I hadn't noticed until this point is at the school you can spend additional time with your teachers outside of classes. Normally this would be frowned upon, but I guess in Paldea it's okay. These chats are a small storyline for each teacher to have with you, but to me they are minor enough that, like the classes, I won't be saying much about them. Despite trying to keep these 3 main quests mostly even, I decided I'd had enough with having limits on where I could go and explore. I would just simply take out the last Titan and be done with it. I haven't talked about it much, but there have been many times where I have grown frustrated on not finding paths to places. You could argue these are places I shouldn't have been yet, but you are able to get to almost anywhere without additional Miraidon movement, but thanks to my bad navigation skills, that hasn't always been the case. The False Dragon Titan was the one thing standing in my way, and it was definitely the most unique one. There's a Tatsugiri hanging out on this island before it's swallowed up by a Dodonzo, and the battle then starts. Dodonzo is as bulky as he looks, so after my plan to use electric Pokemon failed, I then swapped to simply resisting his attacks and used my good old starter instead to finish Phase 1. As I'm tracking down Dodonzo for Phase 2, he busts open his Herba Mystica cave, but a Tatsugiri flopped on inside to then only be swallowed up by the Dodonzo when back outside. Phase 2's battle went smoother from Arven taking some of the pressure off, and I thought that this was the end of it until it turned out that the Tatsugiri had escaped unharmed due to it being, in fact, a battle mechanic for those two, but also because it was the true False Dragon Titan. After defeating it, Arven was able to acquire the spicy Herba Mystica. The dish allowed Miraidon to climb on walls, and as for Mombastiff, look at him go! Bud! I know, Bud. Me too. Aww. This isn't gonna make me cry, but it is very sweet. Because he's somehow all-knowing, Turo gives us a call, praising us for restoring all but Miraidon's battle powers, and to tell Arven he had been looking for a way to reach him because he's the only one who can get into his lab, and he wants him to take me there. This wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the fact this is the first time Arven had heard from his dad in literal years. Naturally, this pisses him off, but he says he'll do it anyway. For us. Get in the lab, Arven. By this point, I had caught wind that Arven gives you a particularly tricky fight at the lighthouse, and I was advised to hold off for now. So instead, I decided to stretch Miraidon's legs and head high into the icy mountains of northern Paldea. There are several points of interest around here, but my first stop was Montenevera. Passing by its famous concert stage, I learned that the old gym leader used to be a woman named Time, but a year and a half ago she left to become the math teacher of the academy, and so her sister Rhyme has run it ever since. Rhyme's gym test is reminiscent of Iono's in the sense that we can only have our gym fight going if we can hype up the audience. Here we have 3 battles up on the stage as her opening act. Yeah, if you couldn't guess by her name, Rhyme's big interest is music. I also couldn't help but notice that my opponents were dressed like they hadn't noticed they were in freezing temperatures. I know my cold tolerance is lower than most, and that some audience members do indeed have coats on, but it made me cold looking at them. After the battles were done and Rhyme appears, I thought we'd just launch into the fight, but that's not exactly what happened. Please forgive me for what you're about to hear. Who's this kid? This is my time and this is my day. You're not gonna stand in my way. No, this is the ghost gym. Listen up, Rhyme. Your reign ends here. You're gonna get run up by this pro cashier. Oh, God. This is gonna be like the most cringe thing I've ever read. Pro cashier? Well, I'm about to check out. Must have got your rhymes on deep discount. Please, you think you can step up my Please, you think you can step to my game? Fool, I got rhyme right here in my name. I'm a specter from which there is no protector, and victory unto me will render you when the crowd sees you're a mere pretender. I can't rap. I'm not gonna even try to rap. You want to end my reign? Yeah, keep dreaming. Buy a book of rhymes, kid, and start reading. Yeah. I'm done, you won. My rhyme's totally whiffed, but I'll be back. Maybe after my next shift. Hold up, where are you going? That's how you got? After my next shift? Seriously? Bars over jokes, come on. That hurt me when it happened, and every time I have to replay it to edit it in. There are some things I'm just not meant for. But finally getting to the battle, she goes at me with her ghost types, but as a double battle. This shook things up a little bit, and was definitely not a sweep, but my biggest takeaway is that I loved this vibing Grievard, and he and his evolution, Houndstone, are also some of my favorite new Pokemon from this gen. After getting my badge, I head to the nearest Team Star base, which is run by Aerie and her fighting types, but something is off. As you can see, there's a bit of a level gap against me here versus this guard outside. Up until now, I've been at or above the level of most things I've come across, so I was not expecting this kind of jump. I should have thought about things a bit after seeing that, but I didn't. After the fight, Cassiopeia calls to tell me that Aerie is the most alert to hostilities out of all the other base bosses, as well as the one who trained them all in battling. I should have thought about things a bit after seeing that, but I didn't. When I'm in the base battling the 30 grunt Pokemon, I notice that this is the longest it's ever taken me to get past this part. Usually it's done within a couple of minutes, but here it takes me over 5 due to frequent vending machine visits. I should have thought about things a bit after seeing that, but I didn't. I made it to Aerie and her full team of Pokemon and things go south almost immediately. My Pokemon can't handle the level gap, and I can only make it to her third Pokemon. I tried again after a little leveling and made it all the way to her Starmobile, but I could hardly hurt it before going down. I didn't have to be doing this part right now. There were other things I could be doing, so, disappointed, I decided to put a pin in this and come back later. I head back south to Alfornada, and this was the town that had given me previous difficulties. Apparently there's a cave you can just walk through to get here, but I never found it, instead being blocked on all sides by cliffs and dead-end paths. Turns out not coming here earlier was for the best because the gym here is meant to be taken in the latter half rather than sooner, so I guess it all worked out in the end. And it's not just me either, even the NPCs are like, dog, we need to get a train here or something because this commute blows. But where the city lacks in location, it makes up for in aesthetics. The houses are colorful, there's a lot of greenery, but there's also these murals depicting the Gen 1 Pokemon party sprites. Those who are too young to have been there or just burnt out by Game Freak's obsession with Gen 1 may not care for or about this, but for me, and mind you Gen 1 is not my favorite gen, I thought these were a pleasant surprise. Nimona had once again access to the tracker she placed on us to meet us at the gym for another match. The levels were much more in our favor, so as usual, she didn't give us too much trouble. Alfornada's gym test was very unique, but kinda in the worst way possible. It's run by Dendra, the Academy's battle instructor and friend to Tulip, the gym leader. Dendra takes us through what they call Emotional Spectrum Practice, or ESP for short. You know, because it's a psychic gym. And how does one conduct Emotional Spectrum Practice, you may ask? Why, by playing the most bare-bones, most lax, quick-time event game I've ever seen. You just press the button in accordance with the right emotes. If you want to get up and get a drink before you hit the button, then go for it because you've certainly got that kind of time. After several rounds of this insult to my gaming prowess, you do a battle. And then you do even more practice and battle again. I felt dumber while playing this. I would rather push that olive all across Paldea than sit through any more of this nonsense. Maybe that was her intention. Her gym fight was actually more challenging than most. She was able to take down half my party, but even with a smoother brain, I was still able to be the one who came out victorious. This leaves me with 1 gym and 2 bases still to go. I initially thought about trying the bases again, but then I was reminded that if I took out the last gym leader, the current level restriction of new Pokemon, now 55, would be removed entirely. And that was a good enough argument for me, so I went back into the mountains to the Glisado gym. Unlike the others, it wasn't a part of a town or a city, it was just a gym in the middle of the snow. The Glacedo's gym test, the intended 8th and final gym's gym test, was the worst one of them all. More than finding some flora directly behind you, and more than pressing a button for ESP. The task was to ride Miraidon down a hill, passing through the flags, in order to reach the finish line before the time limit. The controls were just steering, and the hill was pretty short, but it was the time limit that really set this apart. Please don't tell me that was it. Slows you down? I mean, like, it even fucking mattered. I did in less than 40 seconds. And he gave me a minute and a half. What the fuck was that? I could have just walked down the hill. Congratulations. That was some of the best sliding I've ever seen. Oh, you obviously passed the test with flying colors. I think that might have been the worst gym test out of all of them. I think so. I think that was literally the worst gym test I've ever taken. Clearly, I was pretty disappointed. Especially since apparently the gym leader, Grusha, used to be a pro snowboarder. Like, come on now. I think another reason this gripes on me so much is that it feels like an indirect attack on my favorite typing. I know ice types have a lot of weaknesses, but why not let them feel challenging this one time? But, alas, Skeletor just melted their whole team into a wet puddle of nothing. With all 8 badges collected, Nimona and Gita came out to congratulate me and to point me in the direction of the Pokemon League. But like Arvin and his lighthouse, I left these two hanging as well because I still had unfinished business with Team Star. Going in with a slightly different team at a higher level, Aerie and her stupid Starmobile had become more manageable. I mean, it still took out a good chunk of my team, but the fact remains that this time I had won and I can move on. But before that, the game took me backwards to a flashback of everyone appreciating the efforts Aerie went through to train them all in battle. We then talked some more with the guard from outside the base. She used to bully Aerie before becoming bullied herself, but despite that, Aerie was still there for her and later invited her to join Team Star. Based on what we've seen so far, Clive now had to admit that the rumors of Team Star being a pack of bullies was probably just that, a rumor. But not completely a baseless one. Cassiopeia explains that after Team Star formed, they, as in the Beast Leaders, went to directly confront those who had bullied them. But the bullies bolted before a battle had even started and went so far as to drop out of school, turning Team Star into the villains. Penny adds that if the teachers had been paying the slightest bit of attention during this time, then Team Star never would have been villainized or need to have formed in the first place. And I mean, she's got a good point. If your school's bullying problems are so bad that a student-led anti-bullying game is your first wake-up call to something being amiss, then the academy has bigger problems on its hands. There was only one base left, but as I was setting my course, I figured out why Aerie had given me so much trouble in particular. I sincerely thought that because he's all the way up here, that this would be like the final one, but apparently I just did shit out of order. The second strongest. I guess if I had read these descriptions, I would have known better. For most of the game, I was following the trend of easier stuff being in the southern half of Paldea, and the difficulty climbing the further north I went. It was why I was so frustrated about trying to get to Alfornada. So by that logic, the fairy base way up in the north would have been the most difficult. But no, in that sense, those two are swapped. I would have known this if I had bothered to read the descriptor on Aerie's base. You'd think with my mix-up that it would have made this base a lot easier, and yes, while I was able to get to the boss battle easily enough, the boss battle itself I would not call easy. My team was not exactly efficient for fairy types, and I was too lazy/stubborn to train new Pokemon. It wasn't a clean fight, but I was able to force my way through to victory, into my 18th badge, the last in the game. The usual flashback this time was about the Starmobiles. It seems that Ortega, the kid I just beat, was the one who put in the most time into making them work. Though it seems that it wasn't without struggle. Ortega wanted to abandon the whole thing and just have his rich parents buy them cars. The team proceeded to remind him that part of becoming a member of Team Star was to stop relying on money and others to solve your problems. Millie in particular got heated about this. Heh, you get it? Heated? And decided to work with her Charcadet to see if she could make progress. Back in the present, Clive comes over with a guy named Harrington, who was initially hanging outside the gate. He was the director of the academy before Clavel, so he was able to shed a bit more light about what happened back then. The incident between the bullies and Team Star had become a scandal. After the bullies dropped out of school, a student approached Harrington volunteering to take all the blame for what happened as long as Team Star was left unpunished. Since they were the true victims, he agreed, and he had the student return home to Galar for a year and a half to lie low under the pretext of doing a study abroad. The problem came when Harrington's former deputy erased all traces of the whole affair from the Academy servers to protect himself from any blame. Harrington and the other teachers were ashamed that things ever got to this point and all resigned. Should he have told Clavel and the base leaders about this long before now? You know, before the academic careers of these students were put into jeopardy? Yes. Yes, he should have. But, you know, here we are. Cassiopeia called to congratulate us, but more importantly to reveal a piece of information that I, and I'm sure anyone who's played this game, knew from the start. That Cassiopeia is the big boss of Team Star. Shocking, I know. Knowing that Team Star couldn't continue like this, they decided to use their own code against them to get them to disband. They said they'll meet us by the flagpole after school to get this thing settled. Upon reaching the metaphoric flagpole, there be Clive, who finally decides to ditch this whole Clive skit and dramatically reveals himself to have been Director Clavel this whole time. You actually have a choice as to whether you want to have this reveal be shocking or to tell him you knew all along, and if you go with the latter, it's pretty funny because he just can't fathom how you could have possibly known. But what's truly shocking is that he does another dramatic reveal in that he was actually also Cassiopeia, which is not even remotely possible, but sure. His battle actually gave me some challenge. I ended up losing the first time, but that's okay, because that means I got to see the other dialogue option, and he's just so proud of himself. I also like that he ends up raising the starter that neither I nor Nimona chose. Most of the time the third starter disappears and is never seen again. But if you thought Clavel was done with the reveals, then think again, because this time he reveals that he was not actually Cassiopeia. You all should have been there. My head was spinning from all of these plot twists. Turns out that he actually has a pretty good idea of who Cassiopeia actually is. I wanted to test my skills before I confronted them. But then this time comes out of nowhere and just starts chewing Clavel out because technically battles on school grounds are against the rules, and the fact that he was battling a student makes it all the worse. Like, she went off. She's going to tell Gita about this, and he has to write letters of apology. It's a whole thing now. I know plot is of the essence at this point in the game, but I also wanted to take a quick detour to this character story option with Clavel that opens up at this point. He calls into his office to ask if I know what manner of gentleman's hairstyle is considered cool among the youths these days. And I mean, the answer is obvious. There is no answer within these choices or otherwise that could possibly come close to giant pompadours. I mean, he was already doing it. He knew this answer from the start. Now, rather than call me a miscreant and have me thrown from his office, he actually pondered it and considered perhaps a change of wig. Wait, what? Now these are the reveals I'm here for. It's basically a crime that this knowledge is skippable. But getting back on track, I go to the metaphoric flagpole for the second time and, hey, what do you know? It's Penny, now being labeled as Cassiopeia. It's not like I didn't call this whole way back at the start or anything, but here we are. So Big Boss Pennypeia here proceeds to do what anyone would do in this position, which is to explain her motivations thoroughly. The idea of Operation Starfall came to her back when I defeated those grunts in front of the school at the beginning of the game, and by using her methods of acquiring unlimited LP, she was able to lure me in. Though that claim assumes I even wanted the damn LP and considered I've yet to use any of it, I'd say no. Instead of immediately announcing the end of Team Star so we can all go home, she decides she can only commit to it if we can defeat her in battle. Clavel is back in his Clive outfit since Penny isn't as smart as she thinks she is, and is instructed by her to videotape this match so she can show it to Team Star afterwards. Unsurprisingly, looking at her backpack, her team was full of various evolutions, which is, to be honest, something I'd always wanted as a kid but never got around to actually doing. But maybe that's not a bad thing since I beat her on the first try. But if I did have an EV team, you better believe that Glaceon would not have been cut. Penny. As a last flashback, we see that after the bullies dropped out of school, Penny did try to disband Team Star herself. There was pushback from the base leaders arguing that since they only said they'd fight but didn't actually, that they didn't do really anything wrong. Acknowledging the gray area that is threats, Penny tells them that she'll fix everything and that the rest should start attending school again. As part of their code, no one could ever order anyone to do anything, and so they opted to further establish their bases and hope that Big Boss would return someday. This code, which they all followed so seriously, is how Penny was able to later put together the foolproof plan of disbandment. They always had to accept any challenge made to them, and had to step down upon defeat. She just needed a strong enough trainer, which is where I came in. Now why she couldn't just do it herself, I'm not really sure. I guess perhaps she just couldn't face them, both emotionally and literally in case they blew her cover. And speaking of having covers, we get to see for the second time Clive revealing himself to be Director Clavel. Penny didn't take this very well and was supremely creeped out. But more important was that he brought the base bosses with him and they saw everything. With them all together, Clavel is finally able to give what these kids have deserved for a long time, an apology, as well as revoking the order to disband and expel them. However, that doesn't stop him from chewing them out for their abysmal attendance and brazen customization of school uniforms, use of school equipment, and the creation/joyriding of Pokemon-powered vehicles. The consequence of these delinquent behaviors was to work in the founding and the running of the Star Training Centers, or STCs, which sounds dangerously close to a different acronym. Basically, the school is taking over the use and authority of the Team Star bases and using them to train and hone student talent. I can't help but feel this is a case of taking advantage of students and using their ideas and forcing them into the mold of the ruling authority, giving said authority all the perks, benefits, and credit of said ideas while disguising as a malevolent gesture to the Team Star game because, hey, we could do a lot worse to you if we wanted to, right? But maybe I'm just cynical. Regardless, the base leaders seem pretty jazzed with this new era of Team Star. Later in Clavel's office, Penny makes the interesting request to be punished more than the others for her less than legal means of obtaining that LP during Operation Starfall. It seems that she was hacking into the Pokemon League management system and stealing them. This goes beyond Clavel's authority, so we're kicked out of the office while he gets Gita on the horn and up to speed on all of this. What ends up happening is that rather than punishing her, the League will waive all consequences of her literal felonies if she does some volunteer engineering for them, and then, if she wants, come work for them full-time after she graduates. Penny thanks us one more time for Operation Starfall and offers her help to us should we ever need it, wrapping up the Star Street quest. That's 1 out of 3 major quests done. To me, it only feels right to save the Pokemon League for last, so I decide the next step is to head to that lighthouse. I was initially worried that Arvin might have gotten tired waiting for me, but we somehow still made it there before him. I'm still not over how the cutscene triggers in this game are so scuffed. While unlocking the lab, Arvin laments that while everyone knows Turo to be this great professor, it didn't stop him from being a shitty parent. Arvin has no memories of his dad spending time with him growing up and only had Mamostiv as company. Inside the lab, Turo talked to us from a computer, explained that he is at the deepest point of Area 0 and needs our help in the final step of his research. We are to bring ourselves, the Violet book, the one Arvin's been carrying around, and any friends we deem helpful to find Turo. Arvin could think of nothing he'd rather less do, but hates more the idea of us going in by ourselves. Besides, this way he can finally give his dad a piece of his mind. But before that, Arvin challenges me to a fight to make sure I'm up for the task ahead. This was the fight I was told would be quite difficult, but underwhelmingly, I did not find that to be the case. At least until I got to Mamostiv. After seeing Mamostiv weak and ill during most of the game, it was nice to see him in fighting shape. He was definitely Arvin's toughest Pokemon, and by the end of the fight I only had 2 Pokemon left. Path of Legends ends with Arvin agreeing with his dad's idea of gathering allies to help, describing ideal candidates that match the skill sets of both Penny and Nimona. Penny's story is all done and she offered her assistance should I need it, so ideally we want to be in contact with Penny. I'm not sure how to get a hold of her, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, Penny is no longer on the map. Can I use my phone to call somebody? Actually, it is a fucking phone. You seem to hear the director's voice echoing in your head. Well, if I can't use the fucking phone to call somebody, when can I use it? Alright, I might just have to beat Penny first and perhaps then they'll both come together. That's the only thing I can think of. Okay, so the Pokemon League. That's a whole can of worms right there. I don't know if this is the team I want to take to the Pokemon League. I guess it might as well be. I mean, why not, right? It's the one I've been using all along. And it didn't make much sense to me to put in all the effort of training new Pokemon without knowing if they'd even be any good against the Elite Four. While Paldea does not have a victory road, there was still a dude standing outside the league waiting to inspect my 8 badges. I wouldn't have bothered to mention this, except he said that we could enter the interview room. Guy, I don't want to work here, I just want to kick some ass and leave. But yeah, they meant that literally. Rika, who I can't remember if I mentioned or not, but we've seen her a few times now, actually had us sit down and proceeded to ask us 10 very dumb questions. Some don't even have a correct answer, like, what do I intend to do if and when I become a champion? And others you need to answer based on your answer of a previous question. But if you didn't realize that and just spammed A, fear not, for you can always try again. Thankfully, Rika lets you hang around the room afterwards to make any sort of last-minute team adjustments, which I do, and here's the final comp. Perfect? No. But who cares? Let's get on with it already. And speaking of Rika, she's the first up with her ground type team. Since all types have been covered already in previous plot points, the Elite Four reuses the same typings as the Titans, presumably because I haven't faced teams of those types yet. I didn't know that at this time, so the fact that I led with Sora, my Meowscarada, turned out to be pretty lucky. Between him and my starter, I managed to beat her without too much trouble. Of course, their last Pokemon always gets Terastallized, but without knowing if my Terra Orb could be charged between battles, I opted to hold back until the champion fight. The fact that Poppy comes into the room to battle me means that, at least for this game, they've done away with each member having their own arena, and I don't like that as much. It made the tension of the situation higher when you proceeded deeper into the building with the door locking behind you. The rooms were also themed like the gyms were to represent their specialized typing. Perhaps Gita is stingy with the league's budget, which could have had something to do with Penny draining their funds all year. But back to Poppy, she uses steel types while showcasing Paldea's blatant lack of child labor laws. Steel types can be tricky, but when you have a monster like Skeledirge on your team, there's really no challenge. Time and time again, Skeledirge has proven to be an invaluable member to this team, and it's maybe come to an interesting realization. For the first time ever in Pokemon, the Fire starter is actually my favorite. As mentioned before, I almost always pick the Water starter, and the times I haven't, I went with Grass. But between how cool and powerful Skeledirge is and the memes showing me how precious Fuecoco is, I've had to admit that if I had to choose my starter again, I would choose Fuecoco instead. It makes me a bit guilty because while I still like Quaxley, it was mostly for the Donald Duck memes, and that wears off once evolved. And I'm sorry to all Sprigatito and Meowscarada fans, but I have no changed opinions on that one. It looks like a Neopet, and it should have stayed on 4 legs. Getting back on track, the third Elite Four member was actually quite the surprise. Like all of them, there are someone we've at least seen in passing, but I would not have guessed it would have been everyone's favorite Everyman Larry. There doesn't seem to be a real reason why he has to pull double duty for the league, just that he doesn't like it. Unlike his preference in gym typing, which is of course normal, Larry has a flying team here. This was actually worrying since I didn't have any straight counters to flying and therefore had to switch several times to try to take advantage of secondary typings. No NPCs in this game ever used healing items, so because it seemed fair, and also because of Nuzlocking habits, I, for the most part, did the same. By the end of the battle, I only had 2 Pokemon left, making him the most challenging member so far. Last up was my art teacher Hassel, the Dragon-type trainer. Like with Larry, I was woefully unprepared to handle this type. I tried again to play against the secondary typings, and that Grimmsnarl and Espartha each had a fairy move. It was rough, but I was managing to hold on. At least until his final Pokemon, Baxcalibur, showed up. You'd think with Skeledirge already out on the field at full health, I would have been good, but not even that was enough. If I had Terastallized, it would have been fine, but I still wasn't sure if my orb would have been charged for the next battle or not. Spoilers, turns out Rika does heal your team after this fight. Fearing the worst, I used Miss Magius's Perish Song, which I know will sound cheap to some, but get over it. Besides, I ended up beating it before the count reached 0 anyway. I initially thought I'd be facing Nimona, but turns out everyone has to fight Gita as the final test of their champion assessment, one that she expressed misgivings about. As the final test, she's unable to do anything but go all out, a choice which has barred anyone from passing since Nimona. Gita has a mixed team, but for being the final hurdle, she's actually pretty underwhelming. Skeledirge took care of about half of it. And for her final Pokemon Glamora, I Terastallized Donald, but more because I wanted to give the final KO to my starter with Flare, rather than needing the power boost. Larry and Hassel were tougher opponents, sad to say. But whether deserved or not, I have become the Pokemon champion. Or a champion, I guess. Unlike previous games where you become the sole champion of the region, Paldea uses the title to describe anyone who has passed their champion assessment test, such as Nimona. Speaking of, she was of course ecstatic to hear of my victory, that she and I were now on equal footing and could finally be true rivals. And what does one do with their rival but battle? Surrounded by those who have met along the way, in a place that's significant to the journey, she actually proved to be a challenge and took 3 tries before I could beat her, completing the Victory Road quest and ready to get back to the whole Area 0 thing. But now this is the part where I have to apologize. During the Nimona fight, my stream had shit the bed. I restarted and it seemed to have been working okay, but I figured, if nothing else, the recording was still going, so I at least have the footage. Turns out no, the footage taken after restarting the stream was in fact corrupted and unusable. This wouldn't have been so bad if it was just the Nimona fight, but it was also a large chunk of Area 0. For the sake of the Let's Play on the other channel, link in the description, I recorded myself going through the key points and places of what I had done so far, because jumping from mid-Nimona fight down into the crater wouldn't have made much sense. So this is what happened. With all 3 quests completed, Nimona and Penny were able to join Arvid and I to head into Area 0. The gate leading into it is southeast of Medali, and once inside we use Miraidon to fly us down into the crater. But at the bottom, Miraidon refused to leave his Pokeball, meaning this whole trip was on foot. This force slowdown was a bummer, but it helped that this place looked good and sounded good. The general environment reminded me of the anime Made in Abyss. There's also Pokemon everywhere. Professor Turo initially tells us that he is locked in a lab by 4 locks at the deepest part of the crater, and to unlock them we have to visit the 4 research centers to unlock each lock. The research labs are how I could heal as well as leave Area 0, so thankfully I wasn't stuck down here. Upon entering labs 1 through 3, Turo drops some world-building exposition about Titan Pokemon. The Titan Pokemon were only Titan Pokemon from being hopped up on herbs, but other than that were regular Pokemon, except for Iron Treads. He came from Area 0 and is classified as a Paradox Pokemon. Turo had built a time machine and was able to bring into our time Pokemon from the future. However, he'd only been able to bring 2 Miraidon. Paradox is a Cyclizar. One who we've been traveling with, and another which should still be down here somewhere. But the 4th research station was trashed, and Turo was unable to clearly communicate to us there. Arvin finds this all very sus, but keeps his thoughts to himself. Deep underground is the lab Turo was trapped in. He called us to be approached to explain that these surrounding crystals provide the power of terrestrialization, i.e. the origin of Terra Orbs, as well as warns us that once we open the door to the lab, we'll release all Pokemon inside. But as we open it, the second Miraidon appears from elsewhere in the cave. It looked like it might challenge us, but mine cowered in fear, resulting in Mirai 2 backing off. Paradox Pokemon then flooded from inside, and after trying to battle them all, it was decided that Miraidon and I should go ahead, while everyone else stayed behind to fend them off. Within the lab, Turo is indeed there, but not looking very organic. Mirai 2 makes another appearance, but Turo calls it back to its Master Ball, explaining that this Miraidon is much more aggressive and in the past fought Mirai 1 for territory within the 4th research building and won, resulting in its destruction and the death of Professor Turo when he tried to protect Mirai 1. This Turo right here is but an AI created by the real Turo. It's never stated how long ago real Turo died, but it was at least since before the start of the game, meaning the AI is who I've been talking to this entire time. But I didn't find a dead body in the research building or even bones, so I guess the Pokemon in the area took care of it. Arvin will need much therapy when this is all over. But the reason AI Turo called us down here was to go against Professor Turo's wishes and shut down the time machine they had built together. Professor Turo's dream was to have future Pokemon and present-day Pokemon live together, a merging of his reality and the topic of his obsession. But the Paradox Pokemon are too powerful and are threatening to break balance of present-day's ecology. AI Turo is unable to see the logic in letting such a thing occur, which is why he wants to shut it down. But due to his programming, AI Turo himself is unable to perform the task. Any attempt on the time machine will activate his defenses towards it, even against his will. Normally such an advanced AI wouldn't be possible, but the crystals that enable terrestrialization are also capable of powering up machinery, causing AI Turo not only to be the most advanced AI, but also the most advanced AI prisoner. His dependence on the crystals keeping him from leaving Area 0. At the time machine, I entered the necessary credentials to initiate a shutdown, but as warned, AI Turo's defense commands overrode it, and the battle commences. The first attempt did not go well. His team is all Paradox Pokemon, and I only made it to his second one. Feeling that this was the true endgame, I decided to use my rare candies to make my Pokemon a more appropriate level. Going back in a bit stronger, smarter, and more lenient on item use, I was able to successfully defeat his team. It should also be noted that after my first try in major battles, I do sometimes look up the typings of unfamiliar opposing Pokemon. I don't really see the sense of throwing things against the wall like that after the initial reveal. The others join me, and Arvin is able to confront AI Turo for the first time. Or is it AI Turo? His name here switches to be ambiguous, and he starts talking to Arvin about how proud he is of him and apologizes for leaving him alone so long. But before Arvin can respond, the security system starts going nuts. Rather than shutting down the time machine, another backup system kicked in called Paradise Protection Protocol. All Pokeballs that aren't registered to Turo are locked, and AI Turo is taken over by the protocol, cutting off his lament on if the proper running of the time machine was truly all what Professor Turo cared about. The protocol sent out Mirai 2 to challenge us, but with mine and everyone else's Pokeballs locked, there is only one option: Mirai 1. For the first time, the game let me select it from my party list and sent it out, finally able to change to its true battle form. But the damage from Mirai 1 is not keeping up with Mirai 2. In fact, a Hyper Beam from it would have taken me out if not for the affection mechanic. Whether that's scripted or not, I'm not sure, but finally the game lets me use my Terra Orb, and a boosted Terra Blast is able to finish off Mirai 2 and the Paradise Protection Protocol. AI Turo congratulates us on defying all supposed outcomes and shares his conclusion that the time machine will never stop while he is present, that he himself as a part of the system will keep rebooting the machine every time it stopped. In watching us throughout our journey, he has become jealous of the freedom we had to pursue our dreams, and that he wishes to do the same. To solve both problems, he will use the time machine to send himself into the future, to keep the world safe, and to obtain his treasure and see what lies beyond. Everyone is sad to see him go, and his final words to Arvin are to relay as a fact that his father had truly loved him. Now on his own adventure, Penny, Arvin, Nimona, Miraidon, and I set out to see what lies in wait for us. And that's the credits. You'd think that I'd start some overall thoughts here, but after the credits, there was a few points of postgame that pop up before the DLC. As you can imagine, Clavel wanted to see us after this whole affair. Of course it was to thank us, give us the traditional Master Ball, and to express his condolences to Arvin. How they treat Arvin dealing with all of this is odd. Alright, I need to go on a tangent here. Bear with me. Before we went to Area Zero, him dealing with the mixed emotions on his neglectful father made sense, but now that he knows the truth, he seems a bit too accepting already. While he is sad that his dad is, dead, the idea that he's like, oh well, he had a time machine, something like that takes priority over caring for your son, is saddening. You could argue that this is a defense mechanism of sorts to help him justify his father's actions until he's ready to deal with it, but do you really think Pokémon thought of that? I'm not so sure, because let's be honest, Professor Turo was a bad father. His research was not all-consuming in necessity of a worldly crisis. It was a passion project that turned into an all-consuming worldly crisis. The AI was able to confirm that his father loved him, but if it wasn't for the fact that the AI had access to his literal memories, what evidence would exist? There isn't even so much as a letter or journal of the professor's that try to justify or explain in his own words why a vanity project meant more to him than his family. I think the game trying to use AI Turo as a stand-in to give Professor Turo a redemption arc was ultimately a failure. While AI Turo was created to be an AI Professor Turo, they became two very different people. AI Turo was the one to initiate the shutdown of the time machine, unable to see the logic in keeping it running. The current cons far outweigh the simply predicted pros. Pros he believed in so blindly that all shutdown methods would always be intercepted. Nothing was more important than keeping it going. His sacrifice for Mirai 1 was a noble act, but it only makes more conspicuous the fact that it's never mentioned how he ever, or would ever, do anything like that for his own son. The only crumb given by the game is the AI name becoming ambiguous as he talks with Arvin before the protocol kicked in, but I personally don't buy it. The only way to make that valid would be that was part of a recorded message from the professor to Arvin, but that's never revealed or referenced again. The AI had the dream of seeing what the future held. The professor had the dream of forcing the merging of two realities. The game never goes back to any of this, and so, neither will I. This all ended up being more in-depth than I had planned, but it's a truly interesting premise that I guess wish was done from different storytellers. But back to business. Clavel says that of course he can't share what we did down in Area Zero, but he would like to celebrate my rise to champion rank. Nimona suggests a tournament, and while that surprises no one, Clavel is actually on board with the idea. As is Gita, who just barges into the room. She pledges the league's support, but also suggests that faculty be allowed to enter as well. Nimona points out that she's also the chairwoman of the school, so she too should compete. And while she'd like to do that, she's currently too busy with other affairs. Though if we wish to assist in befitting with our new rank, then perhaps that could be arranged after all. Turns out that the gym leaders are due for their inspections. To do this, I basically go and challenge each for a rematch. The fact that we have champion responsibilities I thought was pretty cool. It actually feels like we've gained some sort of authority. The gym inspections are basically the only task we receive, but maybe that will pave the way for it to be more in-depth in the future. Thankfully, there are no gym tests this time, which is great for them because I would have given the gym leaders a failing grade immediately if so. The gym leaders of course have stronger teams and the extra dialogue with them is nice, but their Pokemon were around the same level as AI Turos, and I was past that point by now. My boy Skeletor's took out 3 or 4 of them almost by himself. I reported back to Gita, and then it was time for the Ace Academy tournament. There were 4 rounds with the winner being the last one standing. I faced Arvin, Professors Jacques and Dendra, and then Gita of course at the end. I was hoping Gita would have improved her team since 20 minutes ago, but perhaps that was too much to ask for. But in case I ever get the urge to assault my peers and teachers with my superiority once again, I can participate in the tournament as many times as I'd like. After the first tournament, the pool of participants broadens, so you're not having to face the same 4 people every time. I've also heard that this is the best place to farm money, so there's also that. Pokemon as a franchise has ebbed and flowed in relevance in my life. As a 90s kid, I witnessed the Pokemania that seized the world and put Pokemon in a permanent spot in our world's pop culture. I saw the decline that happened during Gen 3. I still bought the games, but more out of habit than passion. Only a few friends were still talking about it anymore, especially by Gen 4. I took notice of the resurrection brought on by Gen 6. A flawed generation to be sure, but the jump to 3D graphics, the Gen 1 fan service, and what have you, made Pokemon come back into a more public focus. The cards that were all the rage as a child had a similar boom during the pandemic. If cards weren't your thing, there was always Pokemon Go. Sword and Shield, while some of the more contentious entries, set the precedent for DLC and the groundwork for future titles to improve upon. Legends Arceus showed people that Pokemon was perhaps finally willing to inject new ideas into the very stale formula that was the main series. Main series games continue to be remade to make previous adventures more accessible. A long-requested Pokemon Sap sequel is finally made, new productions for a different audience such as Pokemon Concierge were made, and Ash is finally retired as the enemy's protagonist. So what about these games? Like Zelda, if you've always been a 2D purist, then nothing here will probably sway you. While more people favor Scarlet and Violet over Sword and Shield, there are still many problems, mainly in performance. Frame rate, graphical glitches, and 100 other similar problems riddle the game. For some, these are deal breakers, and while I agree that these games should be long past problems like these, I don't agree with that being a grounds for dismissal. I do agree that shared experience should be a toggle feature, that shiny Pokemon should give a visual and audio indicator when nearby, that voice acting is long overdue, that gym testing to step it up, and more. But there's more going on here. I like that there are 3 main quests now. I like that Nimona is the best rival character we've had in a while, and she isn't even truly a rival until the end. The game opens with her as a champion already. It's no longer a race to the finish, but a point to aspire to. Using an expansion of traversal abilities as a replacement for HMs are not new, but continue to be a nice sight, as well as fast travel from the start. The character customization has nice options, and a lot of the new Pokemon are dope. There are more relevant NPCs that have impact on the story, and more. Whether you like these games or not is up to you. I would not consider them my favorites, but I did definitely enjoy my time. Pokemon Day 2024 happened less than a week ago as I'm writing this, and while there was no announcement of a Gen 5 remake, Gen 10 teaser, or the rumored Let's Go Johto, we did get the announcement of Pokemon Legends ZA, a Gen 6 focused game. Perhaps this will serve as the Pokemon Z that we never got to tie up loose ends with Zygarde and that weird guy with his Floette. What's something you're hoping for when it comes out later this year? Let me know. Well, what happens now? As far as major plot points go, that's basically it in the base game. Of course, you can fill your Pokedex, as much as it allows, finish the teacher stories, find legendaries, and other things like that. But that's not what I did, at least not by this point, so I think for this video, this is the end of the line. And what a line it has been. This is probably the longest script I have ever written at 25.5 pages. I've covered full games before, but those were much shorter in comparison. In fact, this has taken me so long that I've had to rewrite parts of the outro and intro more than once to make it current. I know the DLC is out and I do want to talk about it, but that's its own separate adventure, and in interest of this video finally seeing the light of day, I still think keeping the DLC as its own video is the right call. I still have to play Indigo Disc and the epilogue, but once I do, they'll join Teal Mask and the base game playthrough on the second channel. I'm hoping 2024 is a year that is more kind to me in uploads this year. Fingers crossed. I'll see you guys later.